In 1982, the Greek government passed a law allowing the displaced children of the Civil War to finally come home. The law contained 4 words that made it meaningless for tens of thousands of them. The words, Greek by genus. If you identified as ethnically Macedonian, the law did not apply to you. Your citizenship, stripped during the war, remained stripped. Your family's confiscated land, transferred to others during the 1950s, remained transferred. Your right to return to the village where you were born, denied. Not because of what you had done, because of what language you spoke at home. This episode is not about the children who were displaced in 1948. That story is already on this channel. This episode is about what they passed down. The children who grew up knowing their parents carried something they would not name. The grandchildren who found a photograph one day, or a letter in a language they didn't recognize, or a name on a document that didn't match any name they had ever heard spoken aloud. And the question that arrived with it, not from the past, but from inside their own lives. Who was my family before they became who I was told they were? The détsah behgahltsee, the refugee children of the Greek Civil War, were evacuated from their villages in northern Greece between 1948 and 1949. As documented in the work of historian Loring Danforth and Ricky van Booschoten in their 2012 study, Children of the Greek Civil War, the children arrived in Yugoslavia, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, and the Soviet Union-speaking Macedonian. By the time they completed schooling in their receiving countries, most thought primarily in another language. By the time the borders opened partially in the 1980s, most were middle-aged. They had built lives. They had married. They had children of their own. Children born in Skopje, in Warsaw, in Prague, in Tashkent. Children who grew up knowing that their parents came from somewhere else, but rarely knowing precisely what that meant. This is the second generation, and they inherited something that had no name in any of the languages their parents had been given. They inherited a silence. Not the silence of people who had nothing to say, the silence of people who had learned, across decades of displacement and political pressure, that certain things were safer not spoken. The name of the village, the language that was forbidden at school, the relatives who remained in Greece and could not be contacted, the property that was gone and could not be reclaimed. According to the United Macedonian Diaspora's documentation of these cases, when the 1982 Greek amnesty law was passed, most ethnic Macedonian displaced persons and their families could not access its provisions. Their citizenship was not restored. 3 years later, Law 1540 of 1985 added a second exclusion. Confiscated property could be reclaimed, but only by those who were, in the law's own language, Greek by genus. The property taken from Macedonian families in the 1950s, distributed to others during the Greek government's post-war resettlement program, remained with those others. Legally, permanently, by design. The second generation was born into the downstream of those decisions. What does it mean to grow up inside a displaced family? Not to be displaced yourself, to grow up in a city that was your city, with a language that was your language, in a school that taught a history that included you. But to know, from something in the way your parents moved through the world, that there was a before that nobody described. Historian Loring Danforth, in his field research documented in Children of the Greek Civil War, interviewed dozens of second-generation détsah behgahltsee across North Macedonia and the diaspora communities of Australia, Canada, and the United States. His findings describe a consistent pattern. The first generation communicated the fact of displacement. We came from Greece. We were sent away. We built our lives here. But the texture of what was lost, the specific village, the specific house, the specific language, the specific names that were changed at the border. That transmission was incomplete, sometimes by choice, sometimes by pain, sometimes simply because there were no words available in the new language to describe what had existed in the old one. One documented pattern in the oral history record: many children of the détsah Begalci did not learn their parents' original village names until they were adults. Some learned them from documents they found after their parents' deaths. Some never learned them at all. This is not unusual in displaced communities. What is specific to the détsah Begalci is the legal dimension. The villages still exist. The land still exists. The houses, in some cases, still stand. And the Greek state, through its own legislation, determined that the question of who those houses and that land belonged to had been answered by the identity of who was allowed to reclaim them. Consider what this means for the second generation. Their grandparents owned land in a village in what is now northern Greece. Their parents were taken from that village as children in 1948. Their parents' citizenship was stripped. The land was transferred to others in the 1950s. In 1982, a law said the displaced could return, but only if Greek by genus. In 1985, a law said the displaced could reclaim property, but only if Greek by genus. The second generation grew up knowing, in some vague outline, that there was land. There was a village. There was a before, and that all of it was legally beyond reach. Not because of anything they had done, but because their parents had identified as Macedonian rather than Greek. A legal determination about identity made in the 1940s, transmitted across generations as an inheritance of closed doors. In the diaspora, in the Macedonian communities of Toronto, Melbourne, and Frankfurt, the second generation's relationship to this history takes a different shape. These are the grandchildren of the first generation, born in Canada, Australia, Germany, educated in English or German, with names that are often anglicized or Germanized versions of names that were already changed once at the borders of Eastern Europe in 1948. Some of them carry 3 names in their family history. The original Macedonian name, spoken in the village. The new name assigned by the receiving country's administration. The further adaptation made by a parent or grandparent navigating a new immigration country. 3 names. One person's family line. Historian Ricky van Boeschoten's oral history research, conducted with second and third generation détsah Begalci families, documents a specific moment that recurs across interviews. The moment of discovery. A document found in a drawer. A name on a death certificate that doesn't match the name they knew. A conversation with an elderly relative who finally speaks, once, about what happened. And then never again. In Danforth and Van Boeschoten's framework, this moment of discovery carries a particular weight, because what the second generation discovers is not simply a fact about their family. It is a fact about themselves, their name, their language, their legal relationship to a place they have never been. All of it revealed as constructed, built by historical forces that operated before their birth, on people who were children themselves. The United Macedonian Diaspora has documented 8 major organizations established by the détsah behgahltsee and their descendants. The First World Congress of the Refugee Children was held in Skopje in July 1988. Subsequent congresses were held in 1998 and 2003. The Fourth Congress was held in 2008. These gatherings are not primarily political events. They are identity events, occasions at which the second and third generation meet others who carry the same specific configuration of silence and displacement, who speak, or half speak, or no longer speak, the same language that was forbidden in a Greek school 8 decades ago. who are trying to locate, across decades of administrative erasure, a village on a map that uses different names for the same places. The Macedonian naming question runs through all of this. As documented in the United States Congressional Record in February 2019, ethnic Macedonians in northern Greece, those who remained, and those in the Diaspora, have historically described themselves using a term the Greek state did not officially recognize. The villages of Aegean Macedonia, where the détsah behgahltsee came from, bear Greek names assigned during successive waves of administrative renaming in the early 20th century. The Macedonian names for those same villages exist in oral tradition and in diaspora memory, and in some cases in archived documents that were themselves suppressed or reclassified. The second generation, trying to locate their family's village, must often navigate two parallel naming systems: the official Greek administrative name and the Macedonian name that existed in their grandparents' mouths. This is what bureaucratic identity erasure looks like at the generational level. Not a single dramatic act. An accumulation of small administrative decisions. A name change here, a citizenship strip there, a property reclassification, an amnesty law with 4 exclusionary words that compound across decades until a grandchild in Toronto or Melbourne is looking at a map, trying to find a village whose name they know in one language and which appears on the map in another. The détsah Begalci researcher Risto Kurjazovsky, whose work documented the history of the displaced children from inside North Macedonia, described this transmission problem directly. The records of who left and from where and under what circumstances, these exist in archive collections in Skopje, in Warsaw, in Prague. But the records are incomplete. The oral history is richer but uneven, dependent on which families spoke and which fell silent. And the Greek state's official archival position, that the Macedonian ethnic community in northern Greece did not exist as a distinct entity, created a documentary gap that the second generation inherits as an absence. An absence in the record where their family's story should be. As of 2026, the Greek amnesty law of 1982 has not been amended to include ethnic Macedonians. Law 1540 of 1985, which restricts property reclamation to those Greek by genus, has not been repealed. The United Macedonian Diaspora continues to call for both. The Greek government continues to dispute the existence of a distinct ethnic Macedonian minority in northern Greece. For the second and third generation détsah behgahltsee diaspora in Toronto, Melbourne, Frankfurt, and across North Macedonia, these legal positions are not abstractions. They are the specific reason that a family's land cannot be reclaimed, that a village cannot be visited with the rights of a returning citizen, that a name on a document found in a drawer connects to a history that the official record of one country still does not recognize. The first generation is now in their 80s and 90s. The window of direct testimony, of sitting with someone who remembers the village, who remembers the language as it was spoken before 1948, who remembers what their name was before the border, is closing. The second generation is the archive now, what they carry and what they ask, and what they find in drawers and in conversations with elderly relatives and in documents filed in 3 different languages. That is where this history lives. If you want to understand where this story begins, the 1948 evacuation itself, the villages, the children walking east, that episode is the first file this channel opened. The file on the second generation is still open, and in many cases, it has barely been read. This is The Buried Record. Subscribe to follow the archive. The next file is already open.